Four words. That's all it is. Four words that get asked during traffic stops every single day, all across the country, to completely ordinary people who are just trying to get home. Mind if we search? And in the 2 seconds after those four words land, in that particular kind of silence while the officer stands at your window and the question hangs in the air, most people make a decision that they've never actually thought about. A real decision with real legal consequences, made automatically, on pure instinct, without any awareness that there was another option. They say sure. And this video is about what happens in those 2 seconds, what's actually being asked, what your answer actually does, and what you should say instead. I want you to do something before we go any further. I want you to actually imagine the moment, not think about it abstractly, genuinely picture it. You were pulled over 10 minutes ago. Nothing dramatic. Expired registration maybe, a rolling stop, something minor. The officer has already been to your window, taken your license, run everything. It all came back clean. The stop felt like it was winding down. And then the officer comes back, hands you your license, and then, instead of ending things, says, "Mind if we take a quick look in your car?" Relaxed, casual, like it's nothing. Like this is just the next step in a routine they both participate in together. What happens in your body in that moment? For most people, and I mean most, I'm not exaggerating this, there's an immediate, automatic lean toward yes. Not because they've calculated that saying yes is in their interest, not because they've weighed the legal implications, because the question arrived framed as a small, easy, cooperative ask from someone in authority, and the social programming most of us carry says, cooperate with small, easy asks from people in authority. That programming is useful. It works well in most of life. Here's the one context where it needs a different answer. Before anything else, the disclaimer I actually mean and am not just saying to say. This is not an anti-police video. The legal reality we're about to walk through doesn't require assuming bad faith from anyone. The vast majority of traffic stops involve officers doing their jobs correctly. Most of the time, the consent request is just that, a request, made as part of ordinary procedure. But understanding what consent legally means and what your alternatives are is information that should belong to everyone who drives a car. It doesn't belong only to lawyers and law students. It belongs to you. All right, let's actually get into it. Here's the legal foundation in plain language. The Fourth Amendment protects you from unreasonable searches. For a vehicle search to happen lawfully, there generally needs to be a legal basis. That basis comes in a few forms. A warrant, judicial authorization, specific, signed by a judge, probable cause, a genuine, articulable belief based on observed facts that something specific will be found, not a vague sense, something concrete that can be explained, or your consent. That third one is the one that matters for this video, because consent doesn't require a warrant. It doesn't require probable cause. It doesn't require any prior justification at all. Your agreement does all the legal work by itself. And here's what consent removes. Once you agree to a search, the constitutional question around that search largely disappears. What's found is generally considered legally obtained. Challenging the search itself, arguing later that it shouldn't have happened, becomes extremely difficult because you're the one who said it could. Your yes is enormously powerful in that moment. Most people have no idea how powerful. So what does your no do? Your no doesn't guarantee the search doesn't happen. I want to be clear about this because it matters for what comes next. Officers can search a vehicle without consent when they have independently established probable cause. A trained police dog alert can, in many circumstances and jurisdictions, provide that legal basis, though the specific analysis varies significantly by location. Searches incident to a lawful arrest follow different rules. Exigent circumstances exist. Your no doesn't eliminate any of those possibilities. What your no does is preserve a legal question. It keeps open the possibility of a challenge. If a search proceeds after a clear statement of non-consent, the question of whether that search had legitimate legal justification, without your agreement as the foundation, becomes something a court can actually examine. Consent closes that examination before it begins. Non-consent keeps it available. That difference, between a question that can be examined and one that cannot, is exactly why the answer to, "Mind if we search?" matters more than it seems in the moment. Now let's talk about the social pressure, because that's the real thing we're up against here. When someone in authority asks you a question, especially a question framed as small and easy, there's a pull toward agreement that most people experience without recognizing it as pressure. It doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like being reasonable, like being a normal, cooperative person who doesn't make things unnecessarily difficult. The research on this goes back decades. People comply with requests from authority figures at rates that consistently surprise them when they think about it afterward. If you ask someone right now, would you agree to a vehicle search if a police officer asked nicely? Most would say no. Of course not. Why would they? And then the moment arrives, and they say sure. Not because something went wrong, because the situation is genuinely designed, not manipulatively, just structurally, to make agreement feel like the natural, easy, obvious path. The officer is professional. The request sounds minor. The alternative feels confrontational in a way that seems disproportionate to the moment. The 5 words that break through all of that are not dramatic. They're not a challenge. They're not a statement about anyone's character or intentions. Officer, I don't consent to searches. Said calmly, said once, said without explanation, without apology, without the qualifier, but I don't have anything in there, that almost everyone wants to add. That qualifier, by the way, I don't have anything to hide, but is the thing that does the most damage. Not because the statement is untrue, because adding it keeps the conversation going. It opens negotiation. It signals that your no is actually a reluctant yes waiting to be coaxed out. Say the 5 words. Then be quiet. Here's what tends to happen after you say them. I want to walk you through this because knowing what to expect is what makes it possible to hold the position. The officer may look surprised. The request might come again, rephrased. The warmth of the earlier interaction may shift into something more formal. There might be a pause that feels longer than it is. None of that means you've done something wrong. A shift in tone is a social pressure, not a legal consequence. It's the friction you feel when any interaction goes differently than the other person expected. The correct response to that friction is the same calm you started with. Not defensiveness, not further explanation, just steadiness. If you feel the need to say anything at all after the 5 words, it's just my preference, officer. That's sufficient. It's not aggressive. It doesn't require a debate. It's simply true. What if the request comes as an announcement rather than a question? I'm going to take a quick look in the trunk. Not mind if I, just I'm going to. Said with the casual authority of someone describing something that's about to happen regardless. Many people hear that phrasing and simply open the trunk, because it sounded like a decision that had already been made. Because standing in the way of it felt like active obstruction of something inevitable. It wasn't inevitable. That phrasing was a version of the consent request, framed differently, and your response is the same. Officer, I don't consent to searches. The framing of the ask doesn't modify your answer. That's the thing to hold on to across every version of this. What if it comes with guilt inversion framing? You don't have anything to hide, so this shouldn't be a problem. The response is still the same 5 words. Because the right to decline a search doesn't disappear based on what's in the car. It belongs to everyone, regardless of guilt or innocence. Using it isn't an indication of anything other than being informed. What if it comes with a benefit framing? This takes 2 minutes and you're on your way. Same 5 words. The implied trade, cooperation in exchange for speed, doesn't actually hold up. Declining typically ends the encounter just as efficiently, with legal protections that agreeing would remove. If a search proceeds after your clear non-consent, the position shifts. I'm not consenting to this search, but I won't physically resist. Both parts together. The first is your legal position on the record. The second is your commitment to safety and compliance with lawful authority in the physical moment. Do not touch the officer. Do not attempt to block any part of the vehicle. Do not raise your voice. The physical moment and any legal questions about it afterward are 2 separate arenas. Keep them that way. Let's do the full practical sequence. From lights in the mirror to end of encounter. Hazards on. Safe pullover spot. Park. Engine off. Hands on the steering wheel. Interior light on at night. Not legally required, just genuinely useful for reducing visual uncertainty. Don't reach for anything before being asked. Wait. Do you know why I stopped you? No, officer, I'm not sure. Documents requested. Provide immediately. If reaching toward the glove box. My registration is in the glove box, reaching for it now. Slow, deliberate, hands back to visible position when done. Questions about your activities. I'd prefer not to answer questions about my activities. The consent request in any form. Officer, I don't consent to searches. If search proceeds, I'm not consenting to this search, but I won't physically resist. Stop extending past its apparent conclusion. Am I free to go, officer? If detained, I understand. I'd like to speak with an attorney before answering questions. Post-stop wave back after you've been told you're free. I appreciate it, but I need to get going. 8 phrases, the complete toolkit. Say them out loud right now, every single one. The version of you who needs them to come out naturally, not fought for under pressure. Some scenarios, because real situations have variations. What if the search request comes very early, before the documents are even checked? Same response. The timing of the request doesn't change your answer. Some people feel caught off guard when it comes early because they expected it later. The phrase is the same phrase. What if you've already been talking comfortably with the officer for several minutes and the request comes when you're relaxed? The rapport that built over those minutes is real. The human instinct to maintain it is real, and it will make the 5 words feel harder to say. They're the same 5 words. The preceding conversation doesn't modify them. What if there are two officers and the request comes from the one you weren't primarily talking to? Same response, addressed to both. I don't consent to searches. The number of officers doesn't change the legal position. What if you're a passenger in someone else's car? You're part of the stop. You can be ordered out of the vehicle. Whether you need to identify yourself depends on your state's specific laws. Stop and identify laws vary significantly across jurisdictions. If questions come to you about the car's contents or your activities, I'd prefer not to answer questions without an attorney present. You don't speak for the vehicle or the driver. You speak for yourself. What if the stop is happening very late at night in a location that feels isolated? Hazards on immediately. Slow down visibly. Drive at clearly reduced speed toward the nearest lit, populated area, a gas station, a well-lit intersection, somewhere visible. While doing this, call 911. I've been pulled over and I'm driving toward a lit area before stopping. A legitimate officer understands this concern. The critical thing is communicating the intention while moving, not just driving without explanation. What if after everything, the officer is friendly throughout, and the search request comes across as genuinely no big deal? It might genuinely be no big deal. The friendliness might be completely authentic. It's still the same 5 words, because the legal meaning of your yes or no doesn't depend on the warmth of the person asking. The choice in that moment is a legal choice, not a social one. Make it like a legal choice. Let me say something about what this feels like to do the first time. Awkward. It feels genuinely awkward. The social expectation is so strongly weighted toward agreement that declining feels like you've created a problem that didn't exist before. That feeling is real, and it lasts about 30 seconds. What you said after the 30 seconds is what lasts much longer. People who use these phrases regularly, people who've made this choice enough times that it's become a default, describe it as eventually feeling completely unremarkable, not heroic, not dramatic, just a clear position stated clearly. The awkwardness goes away with practice, the protection stays. Here's what I want you to take from this. That moment, the 2 seconds after mind if we search, is not nothing. It's a genuine choice point with real legal consequences either direction. Most drivers make that choice on autopilot. They say sure because sure feels like the easy, cooperative, obviously correct thing. And maybe it is, sometimes. Maybe the search is nothing and everything is fine and it's over in 3 minutes. But sometimes the car isn't as empty as you thought. Sometimes something belongs to someone who rode with you last week. Sometimes the search takes 45 minutes and makes you late to something that mattered. Sometimes what gets found has an innocent explanation that takes much longer than the stop to resolve. You don't always know which situation you're in. And the yes you give in those 2 seconds, the automatic, instinctive, I have nothing to hide yes, doesn't let you find out before it's too late. 5 words. That's what changes the calculation. Officer, I don't consent to searches. But here's what I've been sitting with since we started this video. We've been talking about the search question as if it's always clearly a question, as if you'll always recognize it when it arrives. What about the situations where you don't? The request that isn't framed as a request. The search that begins not with words but with a position. An officer moving toward your vehicle in a way that implies the decision is already made. The encounter where your behavior itself, opening the door, stepping back, not saying anything, gets treated as implicit permission. Consent doesn't only come through words. That's the part most people have never thought about, and it's what we're covering next.